Thursday, November 9th, 2017, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So I want to talk about the markets. It's just gone past 9:30 London time. And I also want to talk about this book, Twilight in the Desert. Very interesting, especially with what's going on in Saudi Arabia this last week or so. I think it's interesting to bring this book up right now. But first of all, let's see where we are. Spot gold is at $12.84, up about $3. The range has been $12.85 to $12.80, so fairly narrow. We're holding up above that $12.82 level I've spoken about, but still pretty good fight there to keep it below that level. Silver $17.07, up 5 cents. Range has been $17.00 to $17.15. The Dow is down 16 points. It's been down as much as 70 earlier on overnight. So we're at 23,521. S&P down 4, 2590. The NASDAQ futures down 8. Has been down as much as 20. So we have recovered a little bit in the stock markets. Currencies are very steady except for the yen. The dollar is down against the yen. Almost, over 1/3% at 113.42, down 44. Cable and euro very steady, no change really. 131.10 for sterling and 116.00 for the euro. Oil still above that 55, 56 resistance, the WTI. It's at 57.02. So, Twilight in the Desert. The Coming Saudi Oil Shock and the World Economy by Matthew R. Simmons. So who is Matthew Simmons, or who was Matthew Simmons? Because he died in August of 2010. In my opinion, suspicious death, but I'll talk about that later. So who is he? It says here, Matthew R. Simmons is chairman, or was, and Chief Executive Officer of Simmons & Company International, a Houston-based investment bank that specializes in the energy industry. Mr. Simmons serves on the boards of Brown-Forman Corporation and the Atlantic Council of the United States. He's also a member of the National Petroleum Council and the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR. So he's no conspiracy theorist. He's like an insider establishment guy. And it goes on to say he has an MBA from Harvard University. So what is this book all about? Well, basically, I've read this book years ago, but he, makes the case that the Saudi oil fields don't have as much oil as purportedly reported. And he proves it with facts. He talks even about a Senate hearing in the U.S. in the 70s that talks about this. But this, of course, the files of this hearing have been made top secret, and they can only come out in 50 years. So probably sometime in the 2020s. So, and I'll read here in the inside flap of this book. So it gives you an idea of what it's about. It says, Saudi Arabia is the most important oil-producing nation in history. The secretive Saudi government repeatedly assures the world that its oil fields are healthy beyond reproach, and that they can maintain and even increase output at will to meet skyrocketing global demand. And then it goes on to say, but what if they can't? And it says, Twilight in the Desert looks behind the curtain to reveal a Saudi oil and production industry that could soon approach a serious, irreversible decline. In this exhaustively researched book, veteran oil industry analyst Matthew Simmons draws on his own 3+ decades of insider experience and more than 200 independently produced reports about Saudi petroleum resources and production operations. What he uncovers is a story about Saudi Arabia's troubled oil industry, not to mention its political and societal instability, which differs sharply from the globally accepted Saudi version. It's a story that is provocative and disturbing, based on undeniable facts, until now never told in its entirety. Twilight in the Desert examines numerous aspects of Saudi Arabia and its looming oil crisis, including, and I'll finish it here now with these 3 points: the 70-year history of modern Saudi Arabia and the truth behind its troubling mix of monarchy, conservative Islam, severe social restrictions, and economic contradictions. Why the geopolitical phenomena that created Saudi oil invincibility now threaten to bring it to an end far sooner than the world has been led to believe. And third, a field-by-field assessment of 12 key Saudi oil fields and how verified shortfalls in their production and potential stand sharply at odds with unverifiable Saudi rhetoric. So, very interesting book. I think it was written back in 2004, if I'm not mistaken. Let's have a look here. 2005. So it was published in 2005. I think he wrote it a few years before that. And why am I talking about this Twilight in the Desert? Well, maybe it's because of what's happening in Saudi Arabia now. I think it was historic what we saw happen this weekend. The purge, the arrests, the deaths, and all the stories, going on about Saudi Arabia, and even the vision, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia vision, 2030 vision. Why is that suddenly popped up? Is that they realize they're running out of oil? And by saying they're running out of oil, I'm not saying they're not going to have any oil in the next few decades. They probably just won't have as much as people thought they would. It's a little bit like a gold exploration company or gold producing company lying about their reserves of gold. This is the same thing. I guess Saudi Arabia is a massive oil mining, oil extraction country. So why now this Vision 2030? Why all the instability amongst the Saudi royal family, the different clans? Why is this Prince MBS now, getting rid of a lot of people, putting people in jail, freezing assets of very rich Saudis? And it says here in this Vision 2030, thriving economy, investing for the long term. Interesting, if they had so much oil as purported, why this now? And it's interesting that Matthew Simmons talks about how long they could keep going, and it's kind of getting there, I think. So it says, diversifying our economy is vital for its sustainability. Although oil and gas are essential pillars of our economy, we have begun expanding our investments into additional sectors. We understand that there are complicated challenges ahead. So what are these complicated challenges? Is it to do with this? But we have long-term plans to overcome them. In the past 25 years, the Saudi economy has grown by an annual average rate of more than 4%. Contributing to the creation of millions of new jobs. And it says, although we are already among the 20 largest economies in the world, our ambitions are even greater. So there you go. Has this got anything to do with it? And there's other, stories like on Zero Hedge. It came out yesterday. It says, how broke is the House of Saud? What could the impact be to oil prices? Well, most probably higher. I'm not going to come out here and say I think oil is going to 100, but I think the world is kind of not prepared for this, for the fact that maybe there isn't as much oil there as we think. So back to Matthew Simmons. He's an interesting guy because if you remember, back in 2010, we had the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, BP, and he made a lot of controversial comments about this oil spill. This is a guy who's a specialist, you know, investment bank in energy, CFR, what else? Member of the National Petroleum Council. So he knows what he's talking about. And he made a lot of controversial comments about BP. One of them, he said in the June 9th, 2010 interview with Fortune magazine, he said that BP would, and I quote, have about a month before they claimed Chapter 11. He said on June 10th, he was interviewed by Barron's and said that he actually had shorted BP stock. So he was actually trying to warn people about this Deepwater Horizon oil spill. He was in an interview with MSNBC. He was making a lot of controversial comments. And this was happening in June of 2010. And later on August 8th, 2010, according to Wikipedia, Simmons was found dead in his hot tub. An autopsy by State Medical Examiner's Office the next day concluded that he died from accidental drowning with heart disease as a contributing factor. So he was 67 years old when he died. Yeah, it's just, could it be a case of killing two birds, you know, with one stone? You know, burying the Twilight in the desert story and burying, you know, the BP story. I don't know. But so if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Twitter and on steemit.com.